Non-identifying. It is liberating to experience a moment of not being identified. When we are in such a state, we seem to live in a quiet central space within ourselves, although we are aware that on all sides things are trying to advance on us and seize hold. It's like a crowd being kept at bay by some invisible marshals that are shielding us. In such a state we can see one of the main objectives of self-observation, which is to separate ourselves from so much that is continually going on inside our hearts and minds, laying hold of ourselves continually, in fact often dragging us down into the abyss. All this is from another perspective, the house in disorder within us. We can however establish in this house a certain amount of order, which can be done by looking again at what non-identifying means when we are trying to observe ourselves, and not put the feeling of I into what we observe. We are observing it, a machinery of emotions and thoughts, which is self-running, automated and entirely mechanical, never stationary. If we look, we can observe an I in us, a personality within. But this person is not who we are, although they live within us and our roommates. They feed off us, take our name and our life force. We can only arrive at a state of complete confusion if we think that we are singularly I and that in some way that I can also observe this one I. People have the illusion that only one thing acts in them, feels and thinks, then having this illusion they are unable to formulate an idea of what self-mastery might mean. If we suppose that there is only one thing that acts in an individual, then it would be impossible for one thing to command, and another to obey. When the work says that we can be compared with a house in disorder, a house that is full of servants that are under no proper control, it means just that. It means that there are a great many personalities within us, a great many persons, all quite different, whose master is absent, who speak through the master's voice as if in their name, acting just as they please in the house that does not really belong to them, but to the master. If we observe any part of this house in disorder, then keep on taking it as ourselves, then we are making a fundamental error in self-observation. One has to observe that they are many and not one, which is very difficult for most people to grasp. It is uncomfortable to realize and difficult to practice what results from the realization. But it is one of the most wonderful discoveries to be made in this work. If we identify with everything we observe, we will not be able to stop it, we will be continually standing in our own way, trying to lift the board upon which we stand, and continually holding on to exactly what we should be separating from. If we take ourselves as one, then we can separate from nothing that we observe in ourselves. Yourself is not one thing, but composed of many, many selves. Self-observation is to observe these selves that we take so easily as I myself. Self-observation must not be done through identifying. We must not identify with the idea of observing ourselves. It is very different from identifying with what we observe taking place. People sometimes become identified with some word in the work, such as self-remembering, or self-observation, and negative emotion, internal considering, and so on. This prevents them from understanding what such terms might really mean. If we practice self-observation in a very identified way, with a kind of anxiety or exaggerated tension, straining as it were to do it, then there will be no result. You can do nothing in this way. We cannot do anything in an overly anxious state, because we are at once in the wrong parts of centers, where we are really working in a negative state, and so failure depresses us, takes away all of our effort and saps our will. We lose gumption and feel it slipping away between our fingers. The practice of self-observation should be done without showing it to others, without showing it to yourself in a certain way. It is like looking sideways at something, catching it in peripheral vision, while going on as if we were not paying that much attention to it. A great many processes taking place in our mind stop when we try to look at them too directly. Which is of course particularly true of our imagination. Self-observation requires a very delicate touch, because the machinery that it is attempting to monitor is very sensitive and delicate. Then again, we must not expect that because we have observed ourselves for a comparatively short time, we will obtain results right away. There is a saying in this work, that we should not work for results. One reason for this is that if we work for results we become too easily disappointed, and the second reason is that very often results do indeed come, but not the results that we might at first have anticipated. Self-observation gradually increases light. Sometimes in this work a person's inner state is compared with darkness. Self-observation lets in a sliver of light. Many things cease to be able to take place in the presence of light. It is simply this luminescence that may begin to change in a person quite different things from what they might have been anticipating. I'm sure we've all seen memes that point out, the light can heal you. The practice of self-observation gradually lets in more and more light, so much so that when we turn our inner sight backwards, reflecting through the looking glass at our lives, it is as though we see it light up, nonetheless still a faint glimmer, through all those moments of self-observation that lie in our past. We are a machine and work better when we have some light on the mechanism. P.D. Ouspensky would compare the centers in people with very complicated machines of extraordinary delicacy, that we are all trying to operate in the dark. When we let a little light in, when we begin to become more aware of ourselves, along certain definite lines, then we see our engine rooms better. We begin to know how to operate them better, and begin to see where they are wrongly connected, how many mistakes we made when we were operating in darkness or poor lighting at best. This light that we allow in through self-observation enables us to distinguish our inner surroundings, for we live in two environments, one revealed to us through our external senses, which contains a great many people, some good and some bad, and the second, an inner environment which again contains a great many individuals, both helpful and inhibiting. This second ecosystem is what we truly live in, and when we live in darkness we really know nothing about our environment and so take everything as ourselves. Through self-observation light enters, and it is this light that begins to separate us. Esoteric teaching is illuminating, but only when it is understood, valued and then applied through practice. We receive no light without valuation, without a feel for it. Looking outside the window at the sunshine and feeling its warmth on our skin are entirely different sensations. We cannot abuse esoteric teaching simply for personal reasons, to improve our memory, get better at doing our job, seek promotion, or make money and friends as modern motivational speakers might promise. This light begins to make the ideas of work far clearer. We cannot understand ideas of this work unless we work and practice on ourselves. That is because understanding arises as the result of a development of knowledge, and a development of being. Our being will not change if we are completely identified with ourselves, because then there is no light. We are in a state of darkness, and so impaired that we imagine we have one single I inside of us. We think that everything is I myself, or me. There is no light because we are identified with ourselves, which means there can be no change of being. If there is no change of being, then there can be no change in our understanding of this work. We may receive this work as knowledge, but will not understand it. We will be unable to see anything at all worthwhile, which will be because there is no light. When we begin to observe ourselves, to catch glimpses of ourselves, to notice what is going on within us, we begin to separate ourselves from ourselves, which lets light in. Self-observation allows access to light, and that light is called in the work, consciousness. The objective of this work is to increase our consciousness, as we do what we do because we are not properly conscious. We are the people mentioned in the Gospels that live in darkness. One of the fundamental ideas of this teaching is that all of us are asleep, and this is why all terrible things happen upon the earth. What is the real reason? The real reason is an absence of consciousness, consciousness of self or self-consciousness. If we could only awaken through conscious awareness, if we could become more aware of the self in us, then everything would change. First, however, we'd need to wake up to ourselves. Our level of consciousness must expand enormously from its present level. If we take ourselves as one, then that is impossible, because we shall remain as blind to the many different things in us as ever. In speaking about identifying, Gurdjieff said that it was one of the greatest evils, one of the most terrible diseases, that first of all people must struggle with identifying with themselves. Humanity, he said, possesses all sorts of illusions, all sorts of pictures about themselves, and with these illusions and images they are identified. They think of themselves as one person, someone that has will, possessing full consciousness and can therefore do anything they choose to. This is identifying with oneself, or is one form of it anyway. We may of course know all of this, however the point is, we still go on acting and behaving as if we had will and possessed full consciousness. Everyone tells us we just have to manifest things. This is because it has not yet penetrated within, but lies simply in our mind as ideas. It is said that the first form of self-remembering is the realization of one's mechanicalness, which is direct realization that we possess no unified will, but many competing wills, no real consciousness, but many intermittent small consciousnesses that all compete with each other for the light of conscious awareness. People may say that they observe themselves, get to a certain point and then cannot bear to go on, or turn away from what they see. If this is genuine, they will find they will be brought again by life to the same point along some other route. On the other hand, if this is not genuine, if it is simply a bit of self-dramatization, then they will go to sleep at that point. The general teaching of the influences of this work acting upon us, once we have sincerely begun to work, will always guide. If we do not interfere too much and think that we know best. Early each morning, or at least every day, put yourself deliberately under the influence of this work, as there are work states and life states within us. If we are in a work state, then we are, as it were, protected from a number of unpleasant states that otherwise might easily entrap us. Sometimes when we are settled in a work state, we reach momentarily that central position that is referred to at the beginning of this commentary, where we experience a moment of not being identified. To place ourselves into this work state every day, we must find the best practice on our own course, what might suit our own particular path, for nobody can find their way by using someone else's map. There is, for example, the remembering of aim, and an attempt to remember ourselves at the same time. There is reflecting upon something that we might have heard or read with regard to this work. There is going over in our mind the previous day, or remembering something that we have to be more conscious about when interacting with another person. Above all, there is the feeling of standing in the presence of the work, and seeing things in the light of this work. Externally considering and trying, at least for a while, to imagine the life of another, trying to walk and put yourself in their shoes before jumping to any conclusions. That helps a great deal, to an incalculable degree. However, it will depend upon the quality of the effort. For if we give nothing, then we cannot really expect to gain anything in return. That is the law of balance and foundation of alchemy.